Carving for the mandibular first molar starts as usual by naming all the surfaces, the buccal, the lingual, the mesial, and the distal, and dividing each surface longitudinally into two halves. Then horizontally we draw a line that would show us the crown length. In carving the mandibular first molar, we should increase the crown length by 3 millimeters because the lingual cusps are longer than the buccal cusps by 3 millimeters. Now, we should specify the points of the crest of contour of the tooth mesiodistally and the maximum width of the crown cervically, and then we connect the points together with straight lines. The buccal cusps are not all of the same width. It is divided into 2/3 for the mesiobuccal and the distobuccal cusps and 1/3 of the distal cusp, because most of the distal cusp is located more towards the corner or towards the distal side. Okay, the same is done on the lingual side, but on the lingual side we have only 2 lingual cusps, which are divided equally from the midline. Then we remove the excess both from the mesial and distal sides. Now moving to the mesial and distal sides, as shown in the drawing session, we should draw the outline of the crown by noting the lines of the crest of contour and of the maximum width at cervix and locating the buccal and lingual cusps. The buccal cusps now should be reduced by 3 millimeters because the lingual cusp is higher by 3 millimeters than the buccal cusp. The same is done on the other side. And then we remove excess soap from both the buccal and lingual sides to start with the last stage, which is the stage for the roundation. Now to the final step, which is the roundation step. We start, as usual, by removing the corners at the right angles. We remove the most from the distobuccal corner and less from the mesiobuccal, then the least from the lingual sides. We reduce a little bit the distal side of the crown because the distal marginal ridge and the distal cusp are shorter than all the other cusps of the tooth. After finishing with this step, we start by creating the central groove. The central groove on the mesial side is just in between the 2 buccal and lingual cusps, and the mesial marginal ridge is 1/5 the total cervico-occlusal length of the crown. Now the central groove moves towards the distolingual a little bit because the distal cusp is pushes the lingual groove more towards the lingual. The first cut starts between the buccal and lingual cusps, creating the central groove. Then we start by drawing the buccal and lingual grooves. The lingual groove lies below between the 2 lingual cusps, slightly towards the distal, and usually there is no groove between the 2 cusps. It's just a dip in enamel, or sometimes there is a short groove between the 2 cusps. The 2 lingual cusps have the triangular ridges. As for the grooves between the buccal cusps, as you know, the buccal cusps, the mesiobuccal and distobuccal cusps are 40% and 40% of the total mesiodistal width of the crown, and the distal cusp only lies on 20% of the total mesiodistal width of the crown. As for the buccal cusps, they do not have cusp tips, and the triangular ridges are more rounded than the lingual cusps. The mesiobuccal groove that separates the mesiobuccal and distobuccal cusp continues on the buccal surface of the tooth and ends in the middle of the crown. As for the distobuccal groove, which separates the distobuccal cusp from the distal cusp, it ends at the distobuccal line angle in the cervical third of the crown. The distal cusp is shorter than all the other cusps, but it is slightly sharper than the two other buccal cusps. And it lies mainly on the distal side of the crown or towards the distobuccal line angle. Only part of it lies on the buccal side of the crown. We create also the triangular fossae and connect them to the central groove. And we conclude our carving by creating the cervical line. And this is how the final form of the crown should look like. You can see the relation between the three buccal cusps and the grooves separating them, the place of the contact points, how the lingual cusps are longer than the buccal cusps, the position of both buccal and lingual cusps as seen from the mesial and distal, the relation between the two lingual cusps and the groove in between them, the distal marginal ridge, which is shorter than the mesial marginal ridge, and the position of the distal cusp, the central groove and how it goes towards the lingual on the distal side and not in the center of the crown, as well as the triangular fossa and the distal marginal ridge. All are not in the center buccolingually. They move a little bit towards the lingual side on the distal. And finally, the shape of the crown from the occlusal, which should look hexagonal.